Hi, my name is Ed Gonzalez. Today I'd like to demonstrate a new reporting application I created in IBM Cognos Analytics. I did this by creating a custom control using JavaScript in the IBM Cognos Analytics reporting environment. This custom control references the MapBox API and Turf.js. In a recent demo, I talked about how MapBox is already available in IBM Cognos Analytics and that it is actually a pretty awesome tool. However, I also mentioned that its use was still limited to dashboards, and IBM still hasn't tapped into all the features available through MapBox. Now, it is very true that IBM is constantly improving this feature, but with a little JavaScript, we can create custom controls that create maps directly in Cognos Analytic reports right now. I then demonstrated a couple of simple controls that I created to do just that. And again, these controls were pretty simple, but they were created specifically to demonstrate two key points. The first point was simply to show that it can be done, and that with some JavaScript we can access the MapBox API and plot data that flows through a Cognos report directly onto a map in a Cognos report. The second point was to show that when a custom control is carefully created, it can be reused by power users, meaning that they can simply drop the control on a map and set a couple of properties to get it to work, without having to go back to the original JavaScript developer. So again, the controls were simple, and what they produced was a simple .map. But although some .maps can be fairly simple, they also can be pretty powerful, particularly when it comes to seeing the distribution of the dots that represent our data. On this particular map, we can quickly see that we have more retail locations on the East Coast than we do on the West Coast. So now that we've seen a still image of our previous custom control, let's go ahead and take a quick look at it for a review and for those who have not seen the previous demonstration. So now I'm in Cognos Analytics, and this template may look familiar to those who did see my previous demonstration. The only real difference here is the data that I'm using. In my previous example, I used data that came from the Go Sales demo database. In this case, I am using a list of Starbucks locations that happen to be in the Chicago area. Now, this list is from 2013, so it may be out of date. But because it has latitude and longitude, it works fairly well for our demonstration purposes. So let's get started here. So the very first thing we want to do is to get into edit mode and make sure that we are on page design. Then from our toolbox, we want to go ahead and grab a custom control, drop it directly onto our report. Then we set some properties here. The first thing I want to do is, this time around, I want to use UI with event propagation. Then let's go ahead and set the path to our JavaScript file. And I already have that in my clipboard, so I'll paste that in there. Next, we will set our height and width. For our height, I'm going to go ahead and set 700 pixels. And for our width here, let's go ahead and set it to 1,000 pixels here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then probably most important, we want to set the data. And we're going to be using the same data that we have in our list report. So I'm going to click that on query 3. Let's go back to our data items. Store number, longitude, and latitude. And then we should be good to go. We'll just go ahead and run that. There we go. And we can see right away we get our data plotted directly onto the map of Chicago. Now, this being a dot distribution map, we can see right away that we have a large concentration of Starbucks locations in the city center, which is pretty much to be expected, I would think. But we can also see that we have a lot more Starbucks locations on the north side of Chicago than we do on the south side of Chicago. And the same with the Go Sales locations. This might be something that would be missed if we were looking at a simple list report or even a traditional database. Now, we can see right away that this type of map is pretty useful. But in addition to fixed points like these retail locations, it can also be used to see geographic distribution of other types of data, like crimes, car accidents, outbreaks of disease, or even moving objects like planes, trains, and buses, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later on in my demonstration here. So the power of this type of visualization should not be underestimated at all. But we can still take it a step further in our custom controls and within Cognos Analytics in general. We do this by adding another JS library called Turf.js to help us go beyond the simple dot distribution analysis and do proximity and buffer analysis, which happen to be very important aspects of location intelligence. The name proximity analysis is fairly self-explanatory, and it has to do with finding and defining spatial relationships between locations. And with it, we can answer some basic questions like, what is the distance between two retail locations? If I'm standing on the corner of Main and Broadway, what is the closest Starbucks locations? If I own a business, what roads or what bus routes pass in front of my business? If I defined a certain area, 3-4 square blocks, how many geographic points, whether they be stores or hospitals, fall into that area? So these are the kind of questions that we can answer with proximity analysis, and these are the type of questions I'm going to demonstrate in my demonstration. But before I get to the demo, let's talk a little bit more about the data that I'm using. So I already showed the Starbucks locations that I have a list of, and again, it is from 2013, so it may be a little bit out of date. But the important point with this data is that this data resides in Cognos, so it is flowing through the Cognos environment. I have a data module that's filtered already down to Chicago, so I can open it up in Cognos, write simple reports against it, and do some simple analysis against this set of data. But we're also going to combine it with some data that we're going to get from the web. And we're going to get that data specifically from the Chicago Transit Authority Bus Tracker API. So the CTA makes some data available through a web API. And among that data, I'm going to pick out two specific types that we're going to use in combination with our Starbucks locations. And the first one is the bus routes. So I'm going to query this web API directly in our report and return bus routes to plot them onto our map. And the second one is live bus locations. So the Chicago Transit Authority, their buses are GPS equipped, and they report their locations about every 60 seconds or so. So I'm going to ping those bus GPS locations and plot those on the map, again, in relationship to our Starbucks locations. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the demonstration. So let's head back to our Cognos Analytics environment, and we will jump into our welcome page, my content, and in my map, I am going to start with this one here. So let's jump into there. Okay, and again, what we see here is our Starbucks locations and how they're distributed across the Chicago area. Now, again, we can see how they're distributed, and that is pretty powerful, but we want to do some deeper analysis onto this map. So I added a few tools that we can use to do that. So the first one is basically a list of our Starbucks locations, and using this one I can zoom directly into any particular Starbucks and see what happens to be around it. I also have the ability to draw a shape directly onto a map and see how many Starbucks locations fall directly within that shape that I drew. And then finally, routes. I have the ability now to query the Chicago Transit Authority API and return bus routes and plot those directly onto the map. And I'm going to do that and then show how many Starbucks locations happen to be within a certain range of that bus route. So I'm going to start actually right in the middle here and look at the draw tool. So as we saw, we have a large concentration of Starbucks right in the city center. Let me zoom in a little bit here so we can see that a little better here. And what we can do is so to get a count, we can actually draw a box directly onto the map. Oops, I have to double click that one there. And then click on find here to get the total number of Starbucks there. So we can see we have 62 Starbucks in this square area here, or rectangular area. And now we have the ability to do a couple of different things with this. I can click on it, move this up, so we have the same shape, and then click find, and I can see how many Starbucks locations are there. So you can see in this same area, I have 14 Starbucks here. Move that back down. There, we have 65 Starbucks there. But we can also combine. So let's say we wanted a count of all of our Starbucks locations, but we didn't want to have a continuous area defined. We can add additional squares here. So I can do this, and I can see right away, of course, there's only 2 here. But what we can do now is if we click on this, we already had 65 here. If we click on this, it's going to add these 2 boxes together. So the combination of these 2 shapes, we have 67 Starbucks. And we can take that even a step further here and draw another one here. So the very cool thing with this is that the user now has the ability to specify the shape and the size of the location they want numbers for. So that's the first item I wanted to demo here. So let's go ahead and first thing, let's go ahead and get rid of these shapes off of our map. There we go. So now the second feature that I wanted to demonstrate is the store locations themselves and finding out how many other Starbucks happen to be within a certain range. So if I click on this, I'm just going to take the first one here for the sake of argument. If I click on that, I automatically zoom in to that specific store. And let me zoom in a little bit closer so we can see that a little better here. And I set a radius of half a kilometer. And I can see how many other Starbucks locations happen to reside within a half a kilometer. And in total, I have a total of 8 stores, including the one that I have on there. I could subtract that out of there, but for right now, I just left that in there. And I also took that half a kilometer and I divided it into four rings. So we can see in our inner ring, we only have one Starbucks location, of course, and that is the one that we selected. In the second ring, we have one Starbucks location. In the third ring, we have 2. And in the fourth, we have 4 Starbucks locations. And then we can also zoom in a little bit closer and we can see here how this 1, 2, 3, and 4, how this 1 happens to be right on the border here, but it does fall into that 4th ring. And we can zoom back out so we can see how it looks and how many other Starbucks locations we have around there. But we get the count specifically for that half a kilometer, which happens to be 8. So let's reset this here. Sorry about that. I'm going to have to debug that a little bit. But so the next thing I wanted to show was the bus routes. So again, as I mentioned before, we can ping the Chicago CTA and get information about their bus routes and about their buses. So right now I'm going to just plot a couple of quick bus routes. I know a couple off the top of my head. So the first one I'm going to look for is the route 151. We click submit there, and it automatically draws our bus route onto our map, and it gives us a number of Starbucks that are within a certain range. I believe I set it to 1/8 of a kilometer, about half a block, on either side of the bus route to get an idea of how many Starbucks are there. If we zoom in on here, we can see that we have our bus route, which is the yellow line, and we have this gray buffer area. And that buffer area is where we're getting a count. So any Starbucks location that falls within that buffer area is going to be included in this count. And we go down there. And then we can also compare other bus routes. So if I were to take this here, and I would just go ahead and do route 37. Okay, now it's a shorter route, you can see here, and it has 10 Starbucks locations within its buffer area. Let's go ahead and do 36 here. So now that one's plotted as blue, and that one has 23. And finally, let's go ahead and take a look at Route 56 here. It's another long one, but it only has 13. And we can hide this here so we can take a look at that a little bit better. And then as we zoom in, we can see that this one, although it has 13 Starbucks locations within its buffer area, they're pretty far apart. We have one there, and then I believe the rest of them are all within the downtown area. Now we can also take advantage of the MapBox zoom functionality, and we can rotate this a little bit so we can get a better look at our buffer areas, and we can see how they are plotted on there. And now we can also just remove the Starbucks location, or the ones that fall outside of the buffer, so that we can see just the ones that are within our buffer area. So pretty simple, very powerful. I demonstrated 3 particular types of analysis that we can do here. Again, there was the buffer analysis around individual Starbucks locations, the ability to find how many Starbucks are within a given shape that the user draws themselves, and then the bus routes, how we can put a buffer around any type of route. And this could be a road, a fixed road, a route that a vehicle takes, or any type of line that we want to draw. It could be a border between states, but we can add a buffer line there and get the number of features that fall within that buffer area. So that's those 3 things. And now before I go, I just want to show one other one that I think is pretty cool. Back to here, and this time I'm going to do this report here. And it looks pretty similar to the previous one. It doesn't have as many features as the other one does, but what this one does do is that it automatically queries the Chicago CTA website and pulls back the location for buses. And I think I have it set for 4 different routes. So I'm not plotting all the buses that are currently running, but I am plotting probably about 4 different routes, including the 151 that I showed in the previous one. And so now we have our Starbucks locations, which happen to be the red dots, and our bus locations which happen to be the yellow dots. And these update every 20 seconds. Well, I take that back. I am pinging the Chicago CTA web API every 20 seconds, but I believe the buses themselves only update once a minute. So let's go ahead and hide this here real quick so we can zoom in a little bit more and we can see what this looks like on the screen here. So once again, we have our Starbucks locations and the live feed from the buses themselves, and we have the time set. We can see when the last time I updated this data. We can see that it just updated again, so we moved around just a little bit. Now we can take this and I can highlight a specific Starbucks location. Now go back, I think we saw this particular one in our last example here. And now, in addition to seeing how many other Starbucks happen to fall within that half a kilometer, I am also seeing how many buses happen to fall within that half a kilometer. So I can see when a bus comes close to my location. So if we were watching for perhaps a delivery to our location, we can plot that onto the map and we can see how close they get to us. And then that's really about everything I had to show for today. So, in conclusion, I think that we definitely proved that we can do proximity analysis in Cognos with a little help from MapBox and some of its plugins, specifically Turf.js. And I know I said this after my last video, but even now, after adding so many different features to the MapBox control, I still believe that we barely scratched the surface of the things that we can do when we combine the MapBox API with IBM Cognos Analytics. So for more examples, make sure you check out the MapBox website. And then for custom controls in JavaScript, if that's something you're interested in, make sure you check out the IBM community pages. And then also, coming soon, sometime in the next couple of weeks, I will be releasing a tutorial video. These last two videos I did were basically demonstrations, basically showing what it is that I created. But after my last video, I did receive a lot of requests for the source code itself. And instead of just shipping out the source code to people without any explanation, I figured I'd go ahead and do a tutorial video where I can break down how it is that I created the custom controls and how I access the MapBox API. So if that's something that you're interested in, please subscribe to this channel so that you'll be notified when that's released. And then finally, if you need any help implementing this type of solution, whether it be with MapBox or any other types of custom controls, please reach out to me. Or if you would like to have a live demonstration of this where we can answer some questions back and forth, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation as well. That's it. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you guys in my next video.